The morning light streamed through the windows of Janelle Richardson's downtown apartment as she sipped her coffee and gazed at the Chicago skyline. 15 years ago, she could never have imagined she'd be here, watching the sunrise over a city where she now owned one of the fastest-growing banks. The journey hadn't been easy, but that made the view all the sweeter. Janelle had grown up in a small apartment on the South Side, raised by her grandmother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Money was always tight, but her grandmother had taught her something valuable: how to make every dollar count. Money isn't just about having it, her grandmother would say while balancing her checkbook at the kitchen table. It's about knowing how to make it work for you. Those early lessons sparked something in Janelle. While other kids dreamed of becoming doctors or firefighters, she found herself fascinated by numbers, by the flow of money, by the way banks seemed to hold the keys to so many doors in life, doors that often remained closed to people in her neighborhood. In high school, Janelle wasn't the most popular, but she was undeniably the most determined. Her economics teacher, Mrs. Winters, noticed this quiet ambition and took her under her wing. "You've got a mind for business," she told Janelle one day after class. "And businesses need people who understand both numbers and people." Those words stuck with Janelle as she worked her way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. Even then, she noticed how many of her neighbors back home struggled with basic financial services that others took for granted. Check cashing fees ate away at hard-earned paychecks. Predatory loans trapped families in cycles of debt. Bank branches were scarce, ATM fees were high, and trust in financial institutions was low. There has to be a better way, Janelle thought as she completed her MBA. Unlike many of her classmates who headed straight for Wall Street, she returned to Chicago with a different vision. Starting from a tiny office with just 2 computers and a second-hand desk, Janelle launched Urban Finance, a financial technology company aimed at bridging the gap between traditional banking and underserved communities. The early days were brutal: 18-hour workdays, investor doors slammed in her face, and nights spent wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. "Nobody believes a young black woman can revolutionize banking," one potential investor told her bluntly. Janelle had simply smiled, thanked him for his time, and crossed his name off her list. She didn't need doubters, she needed believers. Her first breakthrough came with a mobile app that helped people build credit through their rent payments. Next came a community lending program that pooled resources for small business loans. Each success was small, but together they began to form something meaningful. By year 5, Urban Finance had grown to 30 employees and a proper office space. Janelle had become known in financial circles as someone who could see opportunities where others saw only problems. Her company expanded across the Midwest, bringing accessible financial services to communities that had been banking deserts for decades. "People don't just need access to money," she often told her growing team. "They need access to financial knowledge, to tools that work for their lives, not against them." In the 10th year, when many founders might have sold out to a bigger fish, Janelle doubled down. Her company launched a revolutionary banking app that cut out excessive fees and offered financial education alongside basic services. The app went viral, especially among younger users tired of traditional banking headaches. The success brought attention, awards, speaking engagements, magazine profiles. Janelle accepted these with grace but always redirected the conversation to the work still ahead. Because despite all the progress, she could still see the gaps in the system, the ways in which financial institutions continued to overlook certain communities. That's when the idea struck her. It came during a visit to her old neighborhood, where she noticed a once bustling community bank, now standing nearly empty, its windows plastered with signs advertising high fees and minimum balances. What happens to a community when its bank fails? She wondered. And more importantly, what could happen if the right kind of bank succeeded? The Heritage Bank had been a fixture in the community for generations, but like many smaller banks, it had struggled to adapt to changing times. Now it was on life support, still operating but barely, its customer base dwindling, its relevance fading. Acquiring a bank wasn't something Janelle had planned for, but the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. Her technology could breathe new life into the old institution. The bank's existing infrastructure could give her company a physical presence it had never had before. Together, they might create something neither could achieve alone: The acquisition process was grueling. Banking regulators scrutinized every aspect of the deal. Competitors spread rumors that she was in over her head. Some of Heritage's old guard resisted the change, worried that her tech-forward approach would erase the bank's traditional values. During those difficult months, Janelle often retreated to her grandmother's small house, now maintained just as it had been years ago. Sitting at that same kitchen table where she'd watched her grandmother balance her checkbook, Janelle would remind herself why this mattered. It's not just about owning a bank, she told herself. It's about changing what a bank can be. After 14 months of paperwork, hearings, and negotiations, the deal finally closed. Janelle Richardson became the youngest black woman to own a bank in the state's history. The headlines celebrated the milestone, but Janelle was already focused on the work ahead. The transformation began immediately. Heritage Bank was renamed Community First, its dusty interiors redesigned to feel welcoming rather than intimidating. ATM fees were slashed. Minimum balance requirements were eliminated for basic accounts. Mobile banking was enhanced with features designed specifically for the needs of the local community. But perhaps the most significant change was in the bank's approach to its customers. Janelle insisted that every employee, from tellers to loan officers, receive training not just in banking procedures but in understanding the unique financial challenges faced by different community members. Banking isn't just about money, she told her staff during their first all-hands meeting. It's about trust. And trust has to be earned, especially in communities where that trust has been broken before. Some of the older employees were skeptical at first. They'd seen initiatives come and go over the years, each promising to reinvent banking, each ultimately falling back on the same old practices. But as they watched Janelle work, staying late to help elderly customers understand new systems, personally reviewing loan applications that might have been automatically rejected under old guidelines, that skepticism began to fade. Within 6 months of the acquisition, Community First had already begun to turn around. New accounts were opening daily. Loan applications were up. The bank was becoming a gathering place again, hosting financial literacy workshops, small business seminars, and community events. For Janelle, the most rewarding moments came not from the improving balance sheets but from the stories she heard from customers. The single mother who'd finally been able to secure a mortgage after years of rejections. The retired teacher who'd found a way to make her savings last through retirement. The young entrepreneur who'd gotten his first business loan. These successes kept her going through the inevitable challenges. Banking regulations were constantly shifting. Competition from larger institutions was fierce. And despite her success, she still encountered people who underestimated her or questioned her authority. Janelle knew that changing perceptions would take time. She was not just running a bank. She was changing a narrative about who could lead in the financial world. Every loan approved, every customer served, every profitable quarter was another line in that new story. 1 year after the acquisition, Community First opened its second branch across town. 6 months later, a third location followed. Each new branch was designed not just as a place to deposit checks, but as a financial resource center for its neighborhood. As her company continued to grow, Janelle maintained her habit of visiting branches unannounced, observing operations firsthand, and talking directly with customers. She believed this connection to the daily reality of banking was crucial to maintaining the company's mission. Never forget who we're serving, she reminded her expanding management team. Every policy we make, every product we develop, every fee we charge or don't charge, all of it affects real people's lives. What Janelle couldn't have known, as she built her banking network branch by branch, was that one of these routine visits would soon lead to an encounter that would test everything she stood for, and turn a spotlight on issues far bigger than one bank or one banker. But that morning, as she prepared for what she thought would be just another day of meetings and decisions, Janelle Richardson felt a quiet pride in what she'd built. From a child watching her grandmother budget at the kitchen table, to the owner of a growing banking network, she had transformed not just her own life but the financial landscape of her community, and she was just getting started. Janelle's Thursday had started like any other. She woke at 5, went for her morning run along the lakefront, and was at her desk by 7, reviewing the quarterly reports before most of her team had even poured their first cup of coffee. Community First Bank was now in its second year under her leadership, and the numbers were looking good, really good. We're outperforming our projections by almost 12%, her financial director, Thomas, had told her during their morning briefing. The Southside branch in particular is exceeding all expectations. This was exactly what Janelle wanted to hear. The Southside branch had been the latest addition to her growing network, opened in an area where 3 major banks had closed their doors in the past decade. Many had questioned the wisdom of bucking that trend, but Janelle had stood firm. If we're really about community banking, she'd argued to her board, then we need to be where communities need us most. Now that decision was paying off, not just in profits but in the bank's growing reputation as an institution that actually cared about the people it served. By lunchtime, Janelle had worked through a stack of reports, taken 2 investor calls, and finalized plans for a new financial literacy program aimed at local high school students. She should have felt satisfied, but something was nagging at her. "You look like you're a million miles away," said her assistant, Diane, placing a salad on her desk. Janelle smiled. "Not a million. Maybe just a few miles south. The new branch? I keep wondering if we're really delivering what we promised," Janelle admitted. "The numbers look great on paper, but that's not the whole story." Diane, who had been with Janelle since the early days of urban finance, understood immediately. "You want to see for yourself." "I think I need to." This wasn't an unusual impulse for Janelle. Despite her growing responsibilities, she had never lost her hands-on approach to management. She believed that spreadsheets could tell you what was happening, but only direct experience could tell you why and how. An hour later, Janelle had traded her designer suit for jeans and a simple blouse. She pulled her hair back into a casual ponytail, swapped her heels for flats, and grabbed a jacket that had seen better days. Looking in the mirror of her office bathroom, she barely recognized the banking executive she'd been that morning. That was exactly the point. Today she didn't want to be Janelle Richardson, CEO and owner. She wanted to be just another customer, experiencing her bank the way ordinary people did every day. The Southside branch was busy when she arrived. A line of customers stretched from the teller's windows and all the customer service desks were occupied. Janelle took her place at the back of the line, observing everything: the lighting, the seating, the facial expressions of people waiting, the tone of the staff's voices. She noticed a young mother struggling to keep her toddler entertained in line, and an elderly man who seemed confused by the digital check-in system. These were the kinds of details that never made it into reports but made all the difference in how people experienced banking. When her turn came, Janelle approached a teller she didn't recognize, a young woman whose nameplate read Tiffany. She was new, Janelle realized, probably one of the recent hires brought on to handle the branch's growing customer base. "Good afternoon," Tiffany said with a professional smile. "How can I help you today?" "I'd like to make a withdrawal," Janelle said, sliding her ID and bank card across the counter. The withdrawal was substantial, $20,000 that she planned to use for a community center renovation project she personally supported. It was her own money from her personal account, but it was more than most people withdrew in cash. Tiffany's smile faltered slightly as she looked at the withdrawal slip. "That's quite a large sum to take in cash, ma'am." "Yes, it is," Janelle agreed pleasantly, "but I need it for a project I'm working on." The teller looked uncertain. "I'll need to check with my manager for a withdrawal of this size." "Bank policy." "Of course," Janelle said, curious now about how this would play out. She watched as Tiffany spoke quietly into her phone. Within moments, a man in a crisp suit approached. Gregory Wilson, the branch manager Janelle herself had hired 6 months earlier. Gregory hadn't met Janelle in person yet. Their interviews had been conducted virtually due to scheduling conflicts, and she'd been so busy with the new literacy program that she hadn't made it to his branch for a formal introduction. This, she realized, was about to become an unintentional test of how her staff treated customers they didn't recognize. "Hello? I'm Mr. Wilson, the branch manager," he said, his tone professionally courteous but with an undercurrent of suspicion. "I understand you're wanting to withdraw a large sum today?" Janelle nodded. "Yes, $20,000. May I ask the purpose of this withdrawal?" His eyes flickered to her casual clothes, her simple hairstyle, her well-worn jacket. "It's for a community project," Janelle explained truthfully. "I see." His tone made it clear he didn't really see at all. "And this account has been with us since the bank opened," Janelle said. "Before that, I banked with Heritage." Gregory nodded, but his expression remained skeptical. We take security very seriously here at Community First. Large cash withdrawals can sometimes be indicators of fraud or coercion. I'm sure you understand our caution. I do understand caution, Janelle said carefully, but I've provided proper identification and it is my money. The manager studied her ID card again, comparing the photo to her face with perhaps more scrutiny than was necessary. Ms. Richardson, is it? This is an unusual request. Do you have any additional identification? Or perhaps a phone number where we could verify some information? Janelle was beginning to feel a growing discomfort. Was this how other customers were treated when requesting their own money? Or was there something specific about her, a young black woman in casual clothes, that was triggering this level of suspicion? My driver's license and bank card should be sufficient, she said, keeping her voice level. As I mentioned, I've been a customer for years. Yes, well... Gregory glanced at Tiffany, then back at Janelle. Perhaps we could step into my office to discuss this further. For privacy. Now Janelle was certain this wasn't standard procedure. She had written the bank's policies herself, and while large withdrawals did require manager approval, they didn't require private interrogations. Still, she followed Gregory to his office, curious how far this would go. The office was small but well-appointed, with the community-focused mission statement she had crafted prominently displayed on the wall. The irony wasn't lost on her. Ms. Richardson, Gregory began once they were seated. I hope you understand that we have protocols in place to protect our customers. Fraud has been on the rise in this area, and we've seen cases where individuals are pressured to withdraw large sums. I assure you, no one is pressuring me, Janelle said, a hint of firmness entering her voice. I'm simply withdrawing my own funds for a legitimate purpose. And what exactly is this community project? He pressed. Perhaps there's a better way to handle the finances than carrying around such a large amount of cash. Janelle had had enough. This had gone from standard security to something else entirely, and she knew it would never have happened if she'd arrived in her usual attire with her executive title preceding her. Mr. Wilson, I don't believe I need to explain my personal financial decisions in detail. I've provided proper identification. I have more than sufficient funds in my account, and I am requesting access to my own money. Is there a problem with that? Gregory's expression hardened slightly. Ms. Richardson, I'm simply doing my job. When someone we don't recognize comes in requesting an unusual amount of cash, we have a responsibility to ensure everything is in order. Perhaps if you had made an appointment beforehand, or if you were known to our staff. Known to your staff, Janelle repeated quietly. I see. Gregory reached for his phone. Let me just make a quick call to verify some account information, and then we can... Who are you calling? Janelle asked. Well, for withdrawals above a certain amount, we typically contact the regional director or, in some cases, the ownership. A strange calm settled over Janelle as the full absurdity of the situation dawned on her. You're going to call the owner of the bank to verify my withdrawal? It's standard procedure for... Mr. Wilson, Janelle interrupted, straightening in her chair. That won't be necessary. She reached into her bag and pulled out her business card, the one that read Janelle Richardson, CEO and owner, Community First Bank. She placed it on the desk between them. You'd just be calling me. The color drained from Gregory's face as he stared at the card, then back at Janelle, recognition slowly dawning in his eyes. You're... Yes, Janelle said simply. I am, and I think we need to have a conversation about how customers are treated in this branch, particularly customers who don't look like what you might expect a bank customer to look like. The silence that filled the small office was deafening. In that moment, Janelle wasn't just a bank owner facing an embarrassed employee. She was every person who had ever been made to feel they didn't belong in spaces they had every right to occupy. And she knew exactly what needed to happen next. The silence in Gregory's office seemed to stretch for hours, though in reality it was only seconds. Gregory stared at Janelle's business card as if it might suddenly vanish, then looked back up at the woman sitting across from him, the woman he had just been treating with thinly veiled suspicion, the woman who signed his paychecks. Ms. Richardson, I had no idea, he finally stammered, his face flushing with embarrassment. Please accept my sincere apologies. If I had known, that's exactly the problem, Janelle interrupted, her voice calm but firm. You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect. The question isn't how you treat the owner of the bank. It's how you treat every person who walks through those doors. Gregory swallowed hard. In the doorway, Tiffany the teller had appeared, likely coming to check on the situation. Her eyes widened as she looked from Gregory's ashen face to Janelle. "Miss Tiffany," Janelle said, turning to address the young teller directly. "Would you please ask Thomas from the loan department to join us? And Lisa from customer service as well." Tiffany nodded quickly and disappeared. Gregory looked like a man watching his career flash before his eyes. Should I clear out my office?" he asked quietly. Janelle considered him carefully. In her climb to success, she had encountered countless Gregorys. People who couldn't see past her appearance to her capabilities. People who made assumptions based on stereotypes rather than substance. Her instinct in the early days had been to fight fire with fire, to demand immediate consequences for such behavior. But experience had taught her something more valuable: the difference between punishment and education. "That depends," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Are you more interested in defending what just happened or in understanding it?" Before Gregory could answer, Thomas appeared in the doorway with Lisa close behind. Both looked confused until they spotted Janelle. Recognition dawned immediately on Thomas's face. He had been working with Janelle for years, while Lisa's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Ms. Richardson," Thomas exclaimed. "We weren't expecting you today." "Clearly not," Janelle replied with a small smile. She gestured for them both to enter. "Please close the door and have a seat. We're having an important conversation about customer service at Community First." As they settled into chairs, Janelle remained standing, suddenly aware that this unexpected moment had become something pivotal, not just for Gregory or this branch, but for everything she had been trying to build. "I came in today as a customer, not as the CEO," she explained. "I wanted to experience this branch the way our customers do. I presented my ID, my bank card, and requested a withdrawal from my personal account." She paused, letting her gaze move from face to face. "And I was treated with suspicion and skepticism, taken into a private office for questioning, and made to feel like my request for my own money was somehow inappropriate." Thomas's brow furrowed. "That's not our policy." "No, it isn't," Janelle agreed. "Our policy is to verify identity through standard channels, and to treat every customer with dignity and respect. But policies on paper don't always translate to practices in person, do they?" Gregory looked down at his hands. "Ms. Richardson, I truly wasn't. That is, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize you were questioning the bank's owner," Janelle finished for him. "But here's the thing, Mr. Wilson. You shouldn't treat any customer the way you just treated me, whether they own the bank or are opening their first checking account." Lisa, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "What exactly happened?" Janelle recounted the interaction in detail: the initial skepticism, the escalating questions, the suggestion that her withdrawal was suspicious despite proper identification, and finally, the moment Gregory had suggested calling ownership to verify her request. "And that's when I revealed who I was," Janelle concluded. "But I keep thinking about all the people who don't have a business card to lay down, who can't say I own this bank. How are they treated when they come in dressed like I am today? When they ask for their money? When they don't match someone's image of what a typical customer looks like?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable but necessary. Thomas shook his head, visibly troubled. "This is exactly what you've been trying to change in banking." "Yes," Janelle agreed. "It's why we exist, to break down these barriers, to create a bank where people feel welcome, not judged, where they can access their money without having to prove they deserve to have it in the first place." She turned back to Gregory, whose embarrassment had given way to a more thoughtful expression. "So to answer your earlier question, no, I don't want you to clear out your office. What I want is for you to understand why what happened today matters, and to help make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." Gregory nodded slowly. "I thought I was just being cautious, following security protocols, but looking back at how I handled it," his voice trailed off as realization set in. "I wouldn't have questioned an older white man in a suit the same way, would I?" "Would you?" Janelle asked, though they both knew the answer. "No," he admitted. "I probably would have just processed the withdrawal, maybe made small talk about what he was doing with it. I wouldn't have assumed." He couldn't finish the sentence. "That's where we start," Janelle said. "With that awareness, These aren't comfortable conversations, but they're necessary ones. Lisa leaned forward. So what happens now? It was a good question, one that Janelle had been considering since the moment Gregory had asked to see additional ID. She could make an example of him, use this as a cautionary tale. That might create immediate compliance through fear, or she could use this as an opportunity for genuine growth, not just for Gregory but for the entire organization. Now, Janelle said, we turn this into a learning moment. Not just for this branch, but for every branch in our network. The words had barely left her mouth when a knock came at the office door. It opened to reveal an older woman in a bank uniform, Vivian, who had been with Heritage Bank for over 30 years and stayed on through the transition to Community First. I'm sorry to interrupt, Vivian began, then stopped abruptly when she saw Janelle. A wide smile spread across her face. Ms. Richardson. What a wonderful surprise. Unlike the others, Vivian's delight seemed entirely uncomplicated by the unexpected nature of Janelle's visit. She crossed the room and took Janelle's hands in her own. I've been hoping you'd visit soon, she said warmly. I've been wanting to show you how we've implemented those new community loan programs you designed. They're making such a difference. The contrast between Vivian's welcome and Gregory's earlier suspicion couldn't have been more stark. Here was a woman who saw Janelle for who she was, regardless of how she was dressed or what she was asking for. Thank you, Vivian, Janelle said, genuinely touched. I'd love to hear all about it. But first, we're having an important discussion about customer experience. Vivian's smile faded slightly as she looked around the room and sensed the tension. Oh, is everything all right? It will be, Janelle assured her. In fact, I think your perspective would be valuable here. You've been in banking longer than anyone in this room. As Vivian pulled up a chair, Janelle noticed several customers in the main banking area peering curiously toward the office. Word was spreading that the owner was on site, and it wouldn't be long before everyone in the branch knew what had happened. That wasn't what she wanted. This wasn't about public shaming or creating gossip. It was about real change. Let's move this conversation, she decided. I want everyone to go about their regular duties for the rest of the day. Gregory, please process my withdrawal as requested. Tomorrow morning, I'd like all staff to arrive an hour before we open. We're going to have a branch meeting. Gregory nodded, looking both relieved and apprehensive. Yes, Ms. Richardson, right away. As they filed out of the office, Janelle remained behind for a moment, collecting her thoughts. What had started as a routine check-in had evolved into something far more significant. She had always known that changing banking culture wouldn't happen overnight or through policies alone. Real change would come from moments exactly like this one. Uncomfortable, challenging moments that forced people to see the biases they didn't even know they carried. Tomorrow's meeting would be just the beginning, but for now she had a withdrawal to complete and a community center renovation to fund. After all, that had been her purpose in coming here in the first place, to put money back into the community this bank served. And despite everything that had happened, that purpose hadn't changed. If anything, it had only grown stronger. The South Side branch of Community First Bank was eerily quiet the next morning. Instead of the usual bustle of tellers preparing their stations and the hum of computers booting up, there was a nervous energy as staff gathered in the main lobby, arranged in a semicircle of chairs. Many had arrived even earlier than the requested hour before opening, uncertain about what to expect. Janelle arrived exactly on time, dressed now in her typical professional attire, a tailored navy suit that fit her perfectly. The contrast between this appearance and yesterday's casual look was not lost on anyone, particularly Gregory, who stood stiffly near the back of the room. Good morning, everyone, Janelle began, her voice warm but authoritative. Thank you for coming in early today. For those who don't know me personally, I'm Janelle Richardson, the founder and CEO of Community First. A few of the newer employees shifted uncomfortably, obviously wondering if they had somehow missed recognizing their boss during previous visits. I'm not here to point fingers or assign blame, Janelle continued, sensing their anxiety. I'm here because something happened yesterday that speaks to the core of who we are as an institution, and what we still need to become. With that, she recounted her experience from the previous day, coming in dressed casually, requesting her own money, and being treated with suspicion rather than service. She was careful not to single out Gregory or Tiffany by name, focusing instead on the interaction and its implications. The question isn't whether we have policies about large withdrawals, she explained. Of course we do. The question is whether those policies are applied equally to everyone who walks through our doors, regardless of how they look, dress, or speak. She paused, looking around the room. Some staff members couldn't meet her eyes. Others looked troubled. A few, mostly those who had been with the bank the longest, nodded in recognition of a problem. They had perhaps observed themselves. I founded this bank because I believe financial services should be accessible and equitable for all communities. Janelle continued. That mission isn't just about where we place our branches or what products we offer. It's about how we treat every person every day in every interaction. From the back of the room, a hand went up. It belonged to Vivian, the veteran employee who had greeted Janelle so warmly the day before. May I say something, Ms. Richardson? Of course, Vivian. The older woman stood, smoothing her skirt as she addressed her colleagues. I've been in banking for 37 years now. When I started, we were trained to make judgments about people the minute they walked in. How they dressed, how they spoke, whether they looked like they belonged. Those judgments determined the level of service they received. She looked directly at some of the younger staff members. We didn't call it bias back then. We called it customer assessment or security protocol. But it was bias, plain and simple. And it hurt people, real people with real money and real dreams. A murmur went through the group. Janelle nodded for Vivian to continue. When Ms. Richardson took over this bank, I thought maybe things would finally change. And they have in many ways. But what happened yesterday shows we've still got work to do. Not just in this branch, but in how banking works, period. As Vivian sat down, another hand went up, this time from a younger teller named Darius. But how do we balance security with not making assumptions? We do get fraud attempts. We do need to protect the bank and our customers. It was a fair question and exactly the kind of practical concern Janelle had anticipated. That's why we have systems and procedures, she replied. When someone presents ID, we verify it through our systems, not through our personal judgment of whether they look right. When someone makes a large withdrawal, we follow the same verification steps for everyone. Not extra steps for some people and fewer for others. Gregory, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Ms. Richardson, I want to apologize again for yesterday. I've been thinking about it nonstop. I didn't see my actions as biased in the moment. I thought I was just being thorough. But looking back, he shook his head. I would have handled it differently if you'd been someone else. That's the truth. His candor seemed to break the tension in the room. Suddenly, other staff members began sharing their own experiences. Times they had been on the receiving end of similar treatment at other institutions, or moments when they realized they might have treated customers differently, based on unconscious assumptions. This was exactly what Janelle had hoped for. Not a top-down lecture, but a genuine conversation among colleagues about the reality of bias in their industry and their lives. After nearly 45 minutes of discussion, Janelle raised her hand to redirect the conversation. These insights are valuable and this dialogue needs to continue. But I didn't call you all here just to talk. I called you here because we're going to take action. She moved to a whiteboard that had been set up at the front of the room and picked up a marker. Together, right now, we're going to develop a new approach to customer service at Community First. One that acknowledges the reality of bias and actively works to counter it. For the next hour, the room buzzed with ideas. Staff members who had rarely spoken in previous meetings found their voices. Veterans like Vivian shared wisdom from decades of experience. Even Gregory, initially hesitant, began contributing thoughtfully about how manager oversight could be restructured to ensure consistency across all customer interactions. By the end of the session, the whiteboard was filled with concrete suggestions. Standardized verification procedures applied identically to all customers. Regular role-playing training to help staff recognize and counter their own biases. A customer feedback system, specifically designed to track equity in service. Community advisory boards at each branch to provide guidance on local needs and concerns. Regular mystery shopper visits by diverse individuals to test for consistency in service. This is just the beginning, Janelle told them as their opening hour approached. Over the next week, I'll be visiting every branch to have this same conversation. Together, we're going to reshape not just our policies, but our practice. As staff dispersed to prepare for the day's customers, Gregory approached Janelle privately. "Ms. Richardson," he began, his voice low. "I've been thinking, would it be helpful if I shared what happened with the other branch managers? Not as some kind of public confession, but as a learning moment? Sometimes it's easier to recognize these issues when you see them through someone else's experience." Janelle studied him, impressed by the suggestion. It would take courage for him to voluntarily share his mistake with his peers. "I think that would be extremely valuable, Gregory. Thank you for offering." He nodded, some of his professional confidence returning. "I became a banker because I wanted to help people build financial security. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing some customers as transactions and others as relationships. That needs to change." As the front doors opened and the first customers of the day began to enter, Janelle felt a cautious optimism. The incident that could have ended with fired employees and public relations damage control was instead becoming the catalyst for meaningful change. It wasn't just about one interaction gone wrong, but about addressing the systemic biases that had plagued banking for generations. But even as she watched the staff greet the day's first customers with a new awareness, Janelle knew that change wouldn't happen overnight. Conversations and whiteboards were just the first step. The real test would come in the days, weeks, and months ahead, as these new intentions faced the reality of daily banking operations. Later that day, as Janelle was preparing to leave for her next branch visit, a young woman entered the bank. She was dressed in worn jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Janelle watched as Tiffany, the teller from yesterday's incident, greeted her warmly and professionally. "How can I help you today?" Tiffany asked. "I'd like to open an account," the young woman replied. "Just a basic checking account to start. I've never had a bank account before." In that moment, Janelle saw the true measure of what they were trying to build. Not just a bank that served communities, but one that welcomed them. One where a first-time bank customer could walk in, wearing whatever clothes they owned, and be treated with the same respect as a seasoned investor in an expensive suit. As Tiffany guided the young woman to a desk and began explaining account options without a hint of condescension or judgment, Janelle saw the first real sign that yesterday's painful lesson was already bearing fruit. The story could have ended there, with new policies drafted, staff meetings held, and incremental changes implemented. But what happened next took even Janelle by surprise, propelling her personal experience into something much larger than one banker could have anticipated. She just didn't know it yet. 1 year had passed since that fateful day when Janelle Richardson walked into her own bank and couldn't withdraw her own money. 1 year of hard work, uncomfortable conversations, and systematic changes. 1 year that had transformed not just Community First Bank, but had sparked a conversation about banking bias that extended far beyond Chicago's city limits. It had started with a tweet. Janelle had never intended for the incident to become public. Her focus had been on internal reform, on using the experience to educate her staff and improve her bank's practices. But 3 days after it happened, as she was conducting a similar training session at another branch, her phone had buzzed with a notification. Someone had posted about the incident on social media, a customer who had been in the bank that day and overheard parts of the conversation. The post was brief but powerful. "Just witnessed Black woman CEO get denied her own money at her own bank until she revealed who she was. Banking while Black is real, y'all. Community first or banking while Black." By the time Janelle saw the post, it had already been shared thousands of times. Her phone was flooding with notifications, journalists requesting comments, community activists offering support, other banking executives expressing either solidarity or defensive indignation. For a moment, Janelle had considered issuing a statement downplaying the incident. After all, she had already addressed it internally. Taking it public might damage the bank's reputation, might turn a learning opportunity into a PR crisis. But then she remembered why she had founded Community First in the first place: to change banking culture, to make financial services truly accessible to everyone. And sometimes change required uncomfortable public conversations. So instead of minimizing what had happened, Janelle had decided to own it. She wrote a thoughtful LinkedIn post describing the incident in detail, explaining how it reflected broader issues in banking culture, and outlining the steps Community First was taking to address bias in their own practices. "As a Black woman who owns a bank, I had a card to play that most people don't, she wrote. I could say I own this bank and watch attitudes change instantly. But what about the millions of people who can't say that? Who walks into financial institutions every day and faces subtle, or not so subtle, bias that impacts their ability to build wealth, buy homes, start businesses, and secure their futures? This isn't just about one incident. It's about a system that wasn't built to serve everyone equally, and the work we all need to do to change that. The post went viral, far beyond banking circles. Major news outlets picked up the story. Janelle found herself invited onto morning shows, financial news programs, and community forums. Everywhere she went, she steered the conversation away from individual blame and toward systemic change. Now, 1 year later, Janelle stood in the lobby of the Southside branch where it had all begun. The physical space looked much the same counters, the same comfortable seating area, the same community bulletin board covered with local events and financial education workshops. But something fundamental had changed, and it was evident in every interaction she observed between staff and customers. Gregory, who had nearly cleared out his office that day, had become one of the bank's most vocal champions for equitable service. After sharing his experience with other branch managers, he had gone on to develop a training program specifically focused on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias in banking. The program had been so successful that other banks in the region had begun adopting it for their own staff. Tiffany, the young teller who had first questioned Janelle's withdrawal, now served as a peer mentor for new employees, helping them understand that security protocols and respectful service were not mutually exclusive. And Vivian, the veteran banker who had recognized the problem immediately, had postponed her retirement to head up a new community advisory board that provided regular feedback on the bank's practices and policies. Ms. Richardson, Gregory greeted her, emerging from his office with a tablet in hand. Right on time for the anniversary meeting, Janelle smiled. The anniversary wasn't something she had planned to commemorate, but her staff had insisted. Not to dwell on past mistakes, they explained, but to celebrate the progress that had grown from them. The community room is ready, Gregory continued, leading her toward a spacious meeting area at the back of the bank. Everyone's waiting. Everyone? Janelle asked, raising an eyebrow. Gregory just smiled and opened the door to reveal a room filled not just with bank employees, but with community members, local business owners, and even representatives from several other banks in the city. A banner hung across the back wall. 1 year of banking differently, community first. Community always. As Janelle entered, the room erupted in applause. She waved it off, slightly embarrassed by the attention, but touched by the obvious sincerity of the gathering. At the front of the room stood a projector screen displaying a series of numbers: customer satisfaction scores, new account openings, loan approval rates broken down by demographics, community investment figures. Each told a story of significant improvement over the past year. But more meaningful than the statistics were the personal testimonials that followed. One by one, customers stood to share how their experience with banking had changed. An elderly woman described how she had been helped to navigate online banking without being made to feel incompetent or out of touch. A young entrepreneur detailed how the revised loan application process had given him a fair chance to present his business plan, resulting in the funding he needed to open his first store. A recent immigrant explained how the bank's new multilingual services and cultural competency training had made him feel welcome and respected, rather than confused and marginalized. Each story represented a life impacted, a relationship built, a barrier removed. Together, they painted a picture of what banking could be when equity wasn't just a marketing slogan, but a fundamental operating principle. As the testimonials concluded, Gregory stepped forward again. Ms. Richardson, we have something to show you. He clicked to a new slide, revealing a certificate from the Federal Banking Association. Community First has been recognized for excellence in equitable banking practices. But more importantly, he continued, clicking to the next slide, 5 other regional banks have now adopted the bias training program we developed. 3 national banks have requested information about our revised security protocols, and 2 banking schools have added our case study to their curriculum. The ripple effect was exactly what Janelle had hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. Change that extended beyond her own institution to influence the broader industry. When it was finally her turn to speak, Janelle took a moment to look around the room, to really see the community that had formed around this shared vision of what banking could be. "A year ago," she began, "I walked into this branch as a customer, not as a CEO. I experienced firsthand what many people in our communities face every day, the subtle but powerful bias that creates barriers to financial services." She paused, making eye contact with Gregory, who nodded encouragingly. It would have been easy to get angry. It would have been easy to fire people, issue reprimands, create stricter rules. But what happened that day wasn't just about individual actions. It was about a banking culture that has historically served some people better than others. Heads nodded throughout the room. This wasn't news to anyone who had ever felt marginalized by financial institutions. What makes me proudest today isn't that we fixed a problem at one branch. It's that we recognized a systemic issue and committed to addressing it at every level of our organization. And now that commitment is spreading beyond our walls. She gestured to the representatives from other banks. Banking isn't just about money. It's about trust. It's about opportunity. It's about building the foundation for individuals and communities to thrive. When that foundation is solid and equitable, everything built upon it has a better chance of standing strong. After the formal presentation, as people mingled and shared refreshments, Janelle found herself approached by a young black woman she didn't recognize. "Ms. Richardson?" the woman said tentatively. "I just wanted to thank you personally." "For what?" Janelle asked, accepting the woman's extended hand. "I'm starting a tech company," the woman explained. "For years I've been trying to get financing, but doors kept closing before I could even fully present my business plan. After your story went viral, I decided to try community first. The difference in how I was treated, how my ideas were received." She shook her head, emotion evident in her eyes. "I got my seed funding. My company launches next month." As Janelle congratulated her and asked to hear more about the business, she realized that this was the true measure of what they had accomplished. Not awards or recognition, but real opportunities created, real lives impacted, real change in how people experience the financial system. Later that evening, as Janelle prepared to leave, she found herself alone in the lobby with Gregory, who was locking up for the day. "You know," he said quietly, "when you revealed who you were that day, I thought my career was over. And now?" Janelle asked. He smiled. "Now I realize it was just beginning. The real work, the meaningful work. I've been in banking for 15 years, but this is the first time I've felt like I'm actually helping build something that matters." As Janelle stepped out into the Chicago evening, she thought about how a single incident, painful and uncomfortable as it had been, had sparked a transformation far beyond anything she could have planned or predicted. The story of the black CEO who couldn't withdraw money from her own bank had become something more than a viral moment or a cautionary tale. It had become a catalyst for examining the subtle ways in which financial systems continued to perpetuate inequality, and for imagining how those systems could be rebuilt to truly serve everyone. Janelle knew the work wasn't finished. 1 year of progress, however significant, couldn't undo generations of banking practices that had contributed to racial wealth gaps and financial exclusion. There would be setbacks, resistance, and new challenges ahead, but as she looked back at the bank, her bank, with its lights still glowing warmly against the darkening sky, she felt a profound sense of purpose.